Hey, sister girls, it's Dylesia, and welcome back to another episode of Mother Daughter Trauma Recovery TV. If you spin the block on me every Monday, you know exactly what I'm going to say. Thank you so much, not really for your support of me, but for your support of yourself. You're committing to healing, you are striving to become your best self, and you're making such necessary investments in your future. So I just want to send a very big thank you from me as well as from who you're going to become, because your future self is certainly going to thank you for the time that you're spending not just listening to these videos but actually implementing the things that I am teaching you. If you are new to this channel, where you been, girl? Where you been at? Okay. No, but welcome. This tribe is growing and growing, and I'm so very happy for just the calling that God has given me and the ability to just touch and connect with so many women who can relate to this, because I know it's been a long time coming. I have spoken to so many women over the course of my over decade long career as a therapist, and they just want to feel seen and heard in this topic area. If you can relate below because you've been to therapists or even had friends or family that just misunderstood you completely when it came to the topic of mother-daughter trauma, comment below. Hopefully somebody will show you some love down there. But just know that I'm just so happy to be creating a safe space, because women who don't have good relationships with our moms, there really is not a safe space. There's spaces that we have to create that are safe, but it requires us to step out of our comfort zone in ways that people just don't even understand. They couldn't even fathom how hard it is to build relationships, to build intimacy with people, to trust individuals. So those who do have that just built in from their mom who is supposed to give it to you, kudos to them, shout out. But that's why I'm helping you all, because I have done the hard work and I want to make sure it's not as hard for you. So make sure that you like this channel, that you subscribe to this channel, or like this video and subscribe to this channel, and that you also share it with someone who maybe you've misunderstood them sometimes and you're like, you know what, I think that she can actually understand both of us in a way that we can't understand one another. So since we both have mother-daughter trauma, I'm giving this to you. So be sure to spread the word, spread the good news. Today's video, we are going to be talking about how to set guilt-free boundaries with your mom. That's tough. All of these topics are not easy topics. Like I said before on one of my previous videos, I try to approach such a heavy subject with a very lighthearted vibe. So, that's why you always hear me making jokes and, different things like that. And my personality is phenomenal for this kind of work because it just makes it a little bit easier. But, the reason why I make sure we're talking about real things is because you all are not going to be able to get the help you need if people keep dancing and pussyfooting around the issue. So we are hitting it head on. We're talking about the things that you lay awake at, trying to go to sleep at night, thinking about how am I going to navigate this? And I know that boundaries is certainly one of them. Reason being, there is it's unheard of to set boundaries with your mom. As we are growing and, society and culture is advancing, we are seeing a little bit more, in terms of like people having to set boundaries with their moms and publicly and vocally speaking about doing so. But, a lot of what I've seen so far, and comment below if you can point me to some different resources, a lot of what I've seen is either very educational, and I mean from a therapeutic standpoint, so it's very psychoeducational and lacks the relatability, or it's overly relatable and it makes a joke out of something that is really a serious topic. So for instance, there are so many videos where people are giving like parodies or making comedy out of how Black moms are growing up, how they used to be. And a lot of that for people who are in our target audience is hard to digest. People send me videos all the time, and at the point in the healing journey that I'm in, it's okay for me to consume it. But I can remember parts of me, from earlier points in my recovery journey where that kind of stuff is not funny, and I still don't think a lot of it is funny. So don't get me wrong, it's not. I can still consume it, and have a conversation with somebody who is on a completely different end of the spectrum when it comes to mother-daughter trauma. But I know that there are you out there who see this stuff floating around the internet, floating around Instagram, TikTok, and you're like, my mom did act that way. That's very spot on. But unlike thousands of people in these comments, I don't think it's funny because it actually hurt me, or it's actually, impacted or stunted my growth in these specific areas. So I am speaking to you because I know that there are videos out there where people are setting boundaries with their mom, and it's a fake situation where they're acting something out. And y'all probably hear my daughters, so I'm not going to apologize though, because they're kids and they're being kids. But if you do hear them, just know that I do have identical twin daughters. They're 18 months, and sometimes they be loud, and that is completely fine. But back to what I was saying. So I know that you've seen videos where somebody's setting a boundary with their mom, and their mom is going to go off on them. So it's making a joke out of how difficult it is to actually broach this topic. So I want to give you some ways, and I really only have one tip, but the tip has layers to it. So I'm going to give you the tip, give you the one secret that I have to setting guilt-free boundaries with your mom, but these actually apply to anybody that you are dealing with. I use it all the time. And then I'm going to give you some different skills and stuff that you're going to have to learn if you're actually going to achieve the secret that I'm sharing with you. So without further ado, drum roll please. The secret is you have to keep your mom as close as love and honor can still remain. So I know we have all, if we're Christian, heard that Bible scripture that says honor your mother and your father, right? And let me know in the comments below if you want me to do a video breaking down that Bible verse and other verses that are misused when it comes to trying to get people to stay in relationships with their moms that are toxic. So let me know that below. But that Bible verse is one of the most misquoted, misdirected, mispurposed verses that I've ever heard. And the reason being is that a lot of people think honor means just putting up with whatever and honestly just being a doormat. But my interpretation of it, and what I really believe that God has downloaded in my spirit, because you have to recognize, and I'm not saying don't go to church. I go to church every Sunday unless something is happening. We're out of town, somebody's sick, something like that. Go to church for sure, but also recognize that when they're talking about moms, they don't have the experience that you do. So I was even in church last Sunday, and our pastor went on a tangent, and he started talking about childhood trauma. And I love the intersection of church and mental health. But the problem is that many people who are speaking on this subject have no context. So childhood trauma, that is a wonderful thing to hear about from the pulpit. But at the same time, do you really know what you're talking about? So, our pastor kind of went on to say that you need to get over it. If your mom hurt you, that happened like years and years and sometimes decades ago. So you need to get over it. Your mom is going to die one day. You only get one mom. Da 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 da. Y'all know the rhetoric that we hear when we're talking to people, especially church people. So I was sitting there and I'm like, and this is honestly a passion of mine, which is why, again, I want to know, are y'all interested in Bible-based content specific to women who have mother-daughter trauma? Like, the interpretations are made for us, because I can absolutely do that. You may not know this, but I used to be a preacher, which is like so to say, because but I used to preach when I was in undergrad. I led a Bible study group, and I would teach Bible study all the time, and sometimes I would preach, and we would have gospel extravaganzas and stuff like that. But either way, that's neither here nor there. What I was saying all that to say was, I am absolutely capable of interpreting the text from the lens of someone who has mother-daughter trauma and delivering it in that way. Now, I'm not going to say I'm going to do it often, because I'm not a pastor and it's not something that I am wholeheartedly interested in. It's just a part of this big vision that God has given me. So let me know if you would watch those videos, because I think it's necessary. It's cultural considerations. And that's what I want you to know. When you're listening to your pastor, you have to know that they're not culturally considering a woman who is crippled in so many areas, paralyzed in her love life, paralyzed in her career, paralyzed in her finances, can't see the world in a way that's healthy because of what their mom did. They're not thinking of all that, because they either can't relate to you, or they're just repeating information that was said to them. And they probably don't really believe it, but it's all they know. So I want you to remember that when you are ingesting content from religious leaders, that they really they ain't thinking of it the way that you are. And that's why God has called someone to do that. And that person is me. And hopefully it spawns other women who are able to digest this information and deliver it to you in this sort of format. So honor your mother and your father so that your days may be long. Literally, it is all it's saying is you have to keep someone as close to you as you can and still honor them. That means for some people, come on close, be up next to me, let's talk every day. For others, that might mean that you need to talk to them once a week, or you can only spend 15 minutes in their presence. And granted, once we get to that point, I'm questioning a relationship. So that's a whole nother video. But there, you have to filter your exposure to people that you're recognizing. I'm only experiencing resentment when I'm with you this long, or when we talk about this subject, or whatever the case may be. All that verse is saying is we have to be responsible. When you're feeling hate in your heart, because the Bible also says be angry but sin not. When you're feeling hatred in your heart and nothing that you do to someone, or in respect to them, is able to be pure anymore, y'all are too close for comfort. And sometimes that person is your mom. So if we got to put mom, far over here, my mom actually used to say this, but I don't trust you as far as I can throw you. She would always say that statement. And, that I'm going to remix it here. Essentially, if I got to throw you far to trust you or to honor you or to love you, then that's what I'm going to do. Because otherwise, I'm keeping you close for looks and for applause. But in reality, I'm not able to show up and be who I am. And if you're not able to be your best self in proximity to someone, then you need to question the proximity of it. So that's the secret, okay? Keep her as close as you can, and honor and love is still present. For me, and many women out there, I'm giving you absolute permission that this can be your story. For me, that means that I can't talk to my mom. We are estranged. We've been estranged for over 3 years. I think we're probably about 6 months shy from it being 4 years. I haven't talked to her. I've had 2 babies, been pregnant, almost died, literally on my deathbed while being pregnant. And still, we haven't talked. And the reason behind that is because I did exactly what I'm telling y'all to do. I am keeping her as close as I can, and honor and love can still remain. Do I love my mom? People ask me that question all the time. I absolutely do. Would I if we talked? Probably not. Because it had gotten to that point where literally every conversation was full of toxicity and attacking me and being defensive and not really wanting to be held accountable. And like, it had gotten too much. And it was to the point where we could literally have no amount of conversation and I be who I really am toward her. So the only option was estrangement. And I say all that to say that, like I said, the blanket secret is that. Now let's break that down. Let's have some layers to it. So the only way again, this is one secret too. So there was one secret, and then there's one way to go about that secret is gradual implementation of your boundaries. Okay. So when you gradually implement your boundaries, what you're able to do is look back and reflect on a situation with someone and experience a relationship and say, you know what? I did all I could. I gave them so many chances. And by chances, I don't mean that you cycled and you allowed them to do the same exact thing over and over. But it's like, they did this and I responded in this way. And I set this specific barrier in place so that that couldn't happen again. And then they did something else and I set another barrier, and they did something else and I set another barrier. And I'm all out of barriers. And the only other barrier that I can have is estrangement. And granted, I will say some of y'all mamas are not as lit as mine. And I don't say that in like oh, my mama more lit than you, my trauma is worse. I'm not saying it in that way. I'm saying that some people are going to respond to the boundaries that you set and say, you know what? Let me get myself together. And I've seen that happen. I've worked with dyads. I've worked with mothers and daughters where the daughter, she kept setting boundaries and mom won't, or sometimes she just set one and was like, forget this. I'm not doing this no more. But I've worked in those situations where mom was like, it was really eye-opening for me that my daughter was willing to go to these extents, and I want to be a part of her life. So what do I have to do? What do I have to learn? What do I have to process that I've been pushing away? And usually it's their trauma with their mom that they were not wanting to acknowledge, that they have to process in order to be able to show up for their daughter the way that they need to. So I will say that estrangement is not going to always be the end result of everybody. But to protect yourself, you have to be willing for estrangement to be the option. If you don't go into boundary setting knowing that this might mean that eventually I'm going to lose this person, you're never going to set your boundaries. You're always going to hold your mom to a higher esteem than you do yourself. And it's going to be like, I'm too afraid to set the boundary. I was actually talking to a friend the other day, and this wasn't really related to mom stuff, but just about relationships in general. And I have so many conversations with my friends about just relationships. And it isn't always relationships that they're in. Sometimes it's a relationship that they're observing, or just we talk in conjecture because they know I love to talk about philosophical shit. But we were talking, and I was like, the hardest thing about advocating for yourself is within a relationship. And any advocating is going to happen within the context of a relationship, but really in an intimate relationship is fearing that somebody that you thought was the one. And granted, all of us think our mom is the one, right? Like that was the one. That was the only mom that we had. We're never going to get another one. So that is you're the one. But it's so hard because when you think they're the one and you fear that setting these boundaries is going to show you that they're not, that is terrifying because you don't want that to be the case. And you can sometimes psych yourself out and say, I'm going to make it easy for this person. I'm going to not, advocate for myself or articulate my needs because I want them around. And that's going to hurt you in the end, sis. So you always, always, always have to consider I might lose this person, but I would rather lose them than lose myself. So the gradual implementation is so, so important, making sure that you're responding according to what is given to you so that your boundaries that you're setting are congruent with the offense that was made. Now, the reason why that gradual implementation, and again, I told y'all this was layered. We got our first layer, now we got our second one, and now we're breaking it down even more. So the reason why gradual implementation is so difficult is because we were not taught impulse control, okay? So I don't know about you. And granted, a lot of women that are watching this video are going to absolutely relate with this statement. Maybe some of y'all were taught impulse control. I'm probably pretty sure that most of y'all weren't. But our moms were like they didn't have no impulse control, sis. Like they didn't have it. So for me, the way that was exhibited from my mom was that she was 0 to 100. Like when I say lit, I mean, you could be like, what happened? Like I don't even know how you got from here to where you at. Like what is, and I always say this to people who are telling me things that happen, like how somebody went from 0 to 100. I'm like, what story are they telling themselves, that caused them to go from this to that? Because I've been that way, like I'm speaking from a place of knowing where my mom was not only 0 to 100, but so have I been in certain points in my life. Now, granted, mine didn't always come out in a boisterous way. um I'll say my 0 to 100 a lot of times was like somebody say something or do something and they might not even realize that they offended me, and I'm like, oh, you got me effed up. And I ain't ever gonna talk to you again. I'm blocking you on Instagram. I'm blocking you on Twitter. I'm blocking you on Facebook. I'm blocking you on my phone. Don't call me. Don't text me. Nothing. Like I'm not giving any forewarning. And it was a situation where I had a girlfriend, and she, for over a year, I know it might have been years, honestly. Like it wasn't more than about 3, but it could have been between 1 and 2 years, or 2 to 3 years. But she kept trying to find me, like she's hitting me up, and I don't know because she's blocked because she's offended me, right? And she's constantly contacting me. And one day I was checking my email, and I had all my emails on my one phone, and she had emailed every email that she knew that I had. And she was just like, hey, I don't know what happened, but I've been like trying to get in contact with you. And if you are willing, please call me. And that touched my heart so much because it showed me that I'm not always right. And sometimes my interpretation of situations is not as certain as I imagine that it is. Like there's so many factors that have to be considered. And at the very least, I can have a conversation with someone. And based on what is said in that conversation, how I feel after it, those kind of things, then I can make a decision. And sometimes people don't even want to have conversations with you and they leave you to your own devices. And in those cases, you have to make your own best decision, right? But someone who is willing to talk to them. And I never had understood that, because my mom depicted to me that if someone does something that you don't like, that makes you feel uncomfortable, that hurts you, you just respond with the worst possible scenario. And for me, I didn't ever really want to hurt anybody, in the sense of like, let me cuss you out or tell you out. And I've done my fair share of cussing folks out, okay? But know that they definitely deserved it. I'm not a 0 to 100 cusser outer. I usually warn you in the middle, like, okay, we getting up there, so please stop, or you're gonna get X, Y, or Z. Is gonna come out of my mouth after this if you don't stop. But my mom was like that, in the sense of like 0 to 100, I'm gonna cuss you out, I'm gonna retaliate, I'm going to attack you. And I saw that being done, but I still did a version of that. I did a version that was without all the dramatics, but I still was gone. Like, you weren't gonna have access to me. That was gonna be the worst punishment, is like, I am limiting your access to me. And I see that meme floating around all the time where like the worst revenge is limiting access. And I agree. It is like definitely for somebody who wants access to your life. But I think there is more context that has to be added to that. These memes and these Bible scriptures, y'all, be having me in my feelings, because I'd be like, y'all have to give people context. And if you're going to do that, that means that you have to have a conversation. If I'm limiting access to you, I'm going to warn you, because that's responsible, right? Now, granted, some offenses are egregious. Like, somebody do certain things to you, of course you're not going to talk to them anymore. Am I going to go talk to the person who raped me when I was 14? Absolutely not. You did that, and I don't have anything to say to you. I don't have to give you the capacity to absolve your guilt by having a conversation with me. That's different, and you get to decide what different means to you, because I've certainly heard of stories where people have, entertained their rapist. And I even had a therapist that, she was my therapist at the time. And she was telling me about one of her clients who they actually had a session with the person who raped her and they talked about it. So I saw that to say that you get to set the ramifications, or the parameters rather, around who you allow to have conversations with you. But if you're out here just not having conversations with nobody, sis, then you probably are 0 to 100. And you have to challenge being that, because you're not going to have any relationships, okay? So we got to make sure we're able to control our impulses. And the way to do that is, like I said, to react according to the situation, but also to guard your gates when it comes to who you're accepting advice from. So I know we all got them friends that can rile us up, right? And I certainly have them too. Like, I'm just because I am healed does not mean that I don't got some rah-rah friends. Like, I definitely have rah-rah friends. I'm not really, am I a rah-rah friend? Probably not. I'm gonna egg you on about like some positive shit, but I definitely have friends that, like, if I told them certain things, they're gonna be like, "Oh, girl, no." With certain people, right? They're just gonna be like, "No, that's unacceptable. Cut that person off. I ain't doing it. I'm sick of them. I'm tired of you telling me this story." So honestly, I don't really share a lot of in process relationship information with people because of that reason. Like, I want to make sure that I'm making a decision from my wherewithal, and also a decision that's guided by God. And that's something that's so hard to do, right? To set boundaries with yourself, so that even when you want to be riled up, you're not going into environments and situations where you are going to be, because you know that it's not healthy for the outcome. It's not healthy for your mind, because you can rile yourself up enough. So that's something that I'm giving you as a takeaway. If you want to be able to set gradual boundaries with people, gradual implementation to only hold them as close as you can and still have honor and love remain, you got to guard your gates, okay? You have to determine, what friends can I get certain things from, right? Maybe this person is great for egging me on, and I use that when I'm scared to accomplish a task or take a risk when it comes to my career. But maybe I don't need to call them when my husband has pissed me off, and I know that they ain't really for marriages anyway. And granted, yeah, you shouldn't have friends that ain't for marriages if you're married, but that's a whole nother video. But I'm just saying, make sure that you're guarding your gates, okay? The second thing that you're going to need to do if you really want to implement this gradual implementation and get this down pat, you're going to have to be able to be comfortable in the gray area. Oh, that's another one that our moms did not teach us, okay? The reason why our moms were 0 to 100 is because they weren't comfortable with the gray area. Every time you see someone, and there's a saying for this, if you see a hit dog holler, like a hit dog gonna holler, when a hit dog holler, that's because they're uncomfortable, y'all. Okay, that's the secret to it. So your mom was out here rah-rahing and stuff. I don't know what they're doing out there, y'all. I'm like, baby, get them calm because they crying and they don't have to be calm, y'all, because that's not what I'm saying. But like something is clearly the matter. But anyway, whatever. I'm in here and I'm with y'all. But so our moms were not comfortable in gray areas. So a lot of times the reason why they weren't willing to give people other chances or hear people out is because like the unknown was unsafe. And I would rather attach a label to this as like, you're not my person or you are evil or whatever the case may be, and just go ahead and recover from losing you than to go through the difficulty of working on this issue. Y'all, I have like, ugh, I've grown so much as a wife because I told Nigel, I was like, bro, I didn't know I was crazy till I got married. Like you know, I knew I was crazy and then I kind of got over that craziness, but I was not in an intimate relationship for it to come out, right? So a lot of us are on like the precipice of intimacy. And when you're on the precipice of intimacy, you don't really know your triggers fully. Like it takes for you to be in a relationship that is intimate, and that doesn't have to be a marriage. That can be a friendship, that can be your family. It takes for you to be in those kinds of relationships for you to really understand what makes you tick, and then for you to really understand how you respond and whether you have that fight, flight, or freeze mechanism within you. And I'm definitely flight, okay? I'm flight, like, and I already told y'all that earlier. I'd be like, no, goodbye, no ma'am. So, or no sir when it comes to him. And it took for me to be married and to, really be with someone who didn't have the same relationship to conflict that I did. For me, conflict was like, if we have a conflict, we're not supposed to be together. Like it means that things are not easy and it's just, it ain't supposed to be. And for him, it was like, we would have an argument, and this is when we lived apart. Nigel and I lived apart, and I love that I'm telling y'all more about my life. But Nigel and I lived apart for 9 months of our marriage. So we were apart, and then I got accepted to a PhD program, and we just decided that it was probably best for us because he was still in medical school for me to just, go pursue. Like we're both pursuing our higher education dreams together, side by side, but apart. And the school I got accepted to was in a different state than where he lived in. So either way, we would have an argument, and I would hang up the phone, and then I would quickly be okay again because the hanging up is like, yeah, forget you. Then you sit there and you like, oh well, let me call back. So I would call back. Why this man would be asleep, y'all? And I'm like, so for me, I didn't think he was asleep because I can't fall asleep that quickly when I have argued. But if you know this story from the Bible, Jesus slept in a storm, child. And when you really trust in him, you will sleep in the midst of a storm. And I think he was just that comfortable with our relationship and with what we had, and like that we were going to go the distance, that he was able to do that. For me though, I'm like, why you not answering? He don't love me no more. We broke up, we divorced, he's not going to be with me. These are all the things that were going on through my mind because that was the relationship I had with conflict at the time. I didn't like the gray area. It was like either this or that. And in order for you to do gradual implementation, you're going to have to be comfortable with it not being this or that. Sometimes it's neither for a period of time. Sometimes it is this and that, all at once. And you have to work with someone to hammer down and figure out like, what direction are we going in? Where are we? And that's just the nature of a relationship. I've done it in my marriage. I've done it in friendships. Relationships are work. Okay. And that is essentially what I'm saying, is that you're going to have to be comfortable doing the work. Now, you can't do the work alone, okay? So if you find yourself working harder than the other person, or they're not willing, they don't want to be accountable, and that's the space that I found myself in with my mom, then that's probably a good indication that it has to be this or that, you know? But more often than not, it's just really tough work, and it's going to require you to pull on God, to pull on your therapist, to maybe get a therapist for that relationship specifically. But it's going to be work, and that means you got to get comfortable with it. And if you're working with your mom and she's also someone who's not comfortable with the gray area, she's also going to have to become comfortable with it. And that was the demise of me and my mom's relationship. Is just she just was never comfortable with the gray area. You know, it was all or nothing for her. And in order for our relationship to be what it was, because I am someone who requires tough conversations and accountability, and because I really just want rewarding relationships. It isn't that I think I know everything, because I want to be held accountable too, right? Like, I want you to call me on my stuff and tell me when I've hurt you and help me understand how to show up better for you. And that means that both of us have to be comfortable with the gray area. And she wasn't willing to do that. So that therapy session that we had, that was the last time I ever talked to her. We had one therapy session, and she attacked me to no end in that session. Let me know below if you want me to do a story time. I was actually thinking about doing those, because I'm like, I share tidbits of my story with y'all as I'm naturally kind of giving you the information that I'm sharing. But I also would love to just have a content pillar on this platform that is called story time, and I'm literally just telling you the stories. And then you can understand even more context as to where I'm coming from. Because I'm coming from a place of someone who has worked with clients for almost 11 years in this subject area. But I also have personal experience too. And I want y'all to understand that without the interruption of psycho, you know, education. So let me know below if you want that. But that was the demise of us, y'all. Like, that therapy session, and she could not handle doing the work. So you got to get comfortable doing the work, okay? And then also recognizing when you are doing it by yourself and being vocal about that. Like, hey, I realize that I am willing to show up and be wrong and, hear you out, but you're not doing the same thing. And sometimes highlighting that to someone will be the introduction to them starting to do the work. So you might have to tell your mama that. And if she is worth her salt, then she's going to say, okay. And that okay might come with some cussing, And this, I talk somewhat, I've shared to some extent on this platform about my relationship with Nigel's mom. And she is like, we're not close, we're cordial because we love the same person. We don't have a relationship, and that's completely fine. And I can do a story time on that as well. But one thing that I value is that she's a mom. And I'll say that without giving the whole story, because that's not what today's video is about, and I don't want this to be too long. But basically, we had a situation, and I mean we as in like us as a couple and her, but it was mainly her issue with me, right? So, but if you got an issue with somebody's wife, you got an issue with them, their husband, you got an issue with them, whatever. So she had an issue with me that turned into an issue with us, because that's what it is. And Nigel stepped in and he was like, listen, like, this is not how this is going to go. You're not about to act like this toward my wife. And if you continue to do so, this is what is going to happen. And because she was unwilling to lose her son, she got her act together. And her act might mean that we are only cordial, which is a decision that I've made, because I just don't think that she could not. I, I think that's the best decision, y'all. We're going to save it for the story time if you're interested. But either way, even though the result of it is just cordialness, she still got her act together, right? My mama ain't do that, y'all. My mom was like, I'm this, and you either going to accept this or you're gonna leave, and that's just what it is. So I respect that she was a mom, and that could happen to you, is what I'm saying. So don't be afraid to hold your mom accountable. Everything is gonna start from a conversation. You cannot dodge a conversation. People say that time will tell. Time and talk will tell. Okay, talk is gonna let you know, is this person willing to do the work or are they not? So on to my third, which I kind of have insinuated in a sense or alluded to when I was talking about how Nigel's mom responded. And I really hope y'all can hear me because my baby is going wild, okay? And in between filming this and my next video, I'm going to have to go see if she okay. But number 3 is you have to articulate your needs and wants. So your needs and intentions, rather. So needs, wants, and intentions, really. But we're gonna start with needs because we're gonna throw too much parsley on the dish, right? We're gonna start with our needs, and then as our moms are able to accommodate those, we might throw in a little wants and sprinkle them. I said parsley because you don't always really need that, but it makes the dish look pretty and add a little bit of something. So start with the basics. You definitely want to articulate your needs, and you also want to articulate what your intentions are should those needs not be met. Okay, so that is a part of the gradual implementation process. I'm going to tell you, like, Mom, I need you to stop hollering at me all the time, or I need you to stop attacking my character, or whatever the need is that you need her to do. And if you continue to do that, this is what I'm going to do. And that this is what I'm going to do might mean, I'm not going to. I've definitely had clients who had this as an exact scenario where parents were alcoholics, or, maybe they were drug addicts or something. And every time that they called them when they're high or drunk, they would cuss them out, slam down to the ground. And the boundary that had to be set in that situation is if I pick up the phone and you're drunk, I'm going to hang up. We're not going to talk. And if that means that you're always drunk and you always calling me when you're drunk, we're just not going to talk. So that's what that sort of looks like is X is what I need, and Y is what will happen if you don't give me what I need. And when you do that, you really prepare someone for the outcome. And that's why I said that you're setting a guilt-free boundary. Because if I've already told you what you can expect if you continue to do this thing, then really the outcome is on you. I already warned you what the result was. We all know when we go to school, you don't do your homework, you're going to get an F. You're going to fail the class. It's why don't we navigate relationships in the same way? Because nobody ever taught us to, right? But it's really simple. That is what I'm teaching y'all today. To establish guilt-free boundaries with someone, it literally has to be to the point where you have no other option than to give this boundary. And the way that you do that is to gradually implement them. Remember, they're congruent to the situation. So I'm not going to kill you because you stepped on my toe, by mistake. That's not what I'm going to do. When you do that, you are setting yourself up for guilt, because all you're going to do is be like, yeah, I killed them. And then later, when you're actually processing that situation, even if you don't admit it to nobody else, you're going to feel horrible because you know deep down inside that they didn't deserve that. But if you step on my toe and I step on yours too, and granted, if you step on my toe by mistake, I'm not going to step on yours too, right? And granted, also, an eye for an eye is not how the world works. So this is actually not a good example. But if you curse me out and then I say, I am not going to talk to you when you have an elevated mood, that is congruent. If you curse me out and I say, I don't know, because I don't be tolerating people cursing me out, right? But I really do want to give y'all a good example. So if you are drunk and you curse me out and I say that I'm not going to be around you when you're drunk anymore, that's understandable. If you cuss me out when you're drunk normally you're not doing that, you're a perfectly fine person, then I say I'm never talking to you again at all. That might not be the best. And granted, up to you, but that might not be the best. If somebody is only this way under given circumstances, then we can just not put ourselves in the circumstances. Like, as I said with you all before, I limit my alcohol, and I didn't say this specifically, but I mentioned my relationship with Nigel's mom. I limit my alcohol intake when I am in an environment where she's at, and that we're a family, like we're in the same family. So we sometimes are in the same place because there is Thanksgiving dinners or Christmas dinner, or we're celebrating something that Nigel has done or somebody else in the family or whatever. And I have to be responsible because I know that her alcohol plus me alcohol, that might not be good. So that is a boundary that I set with myself, really, to make sure that I can navigate that situation appropriately. Again, totally different example, but basically what I'm saying is y'all got to give congruent responses to the offenses that people make. And when you do, you're going to feel confident in the boundary you set, and you're not going to feel like you have to go back on it. Because the worst thing to do is to overreact to a situation and then have to backtrack. That feels awful, but that's guilt. That is guilt. So make sure you're being congruent. And then also, like I said, that you're warning people. So if you do this again, and I love how Nigel did the perfect thing. He said, Mom, you're going to have to stop attacking my wife. You will not treat my wife this way. Because if you do, you ain't never going to see me again. His words exactly were, if we get divorced because of you, you're never seeing me again. And she didn't want that. She didn't want it at all. So she nipped and zipped. And I also helped her out by, putting some boundaries in place as well. So either way, that is the end of our video for today, y'all. Let me know what your thoughts are, what your questions are, and I will certainly address them accordingly. And make sure you stay tuned for future videos and give this a thumbs up, share it, and also like this channel, subscribe, do all the things, okay? See you later.